but that's really why I'm here, to help you fight to get things done in California. Yes. So I'm Yolanda Benson, and it is truly my pleasure to be here tonight. I can unfortunately say that I don't speak the language, but I've been so blessed to have our Consul General for Taiwan kind of tell me everything that's going on. So I do appreciate your culture for sure. Once upon a time, I actually represented the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce and have represented, I do currently represent the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm very young in spirit, but I've been around a while. I have my own firm, I have my own lobbying and advocacy firm, but that wasn't always the case. I've been really blessed. I've worked for 3 governors of the state of California. For those of you who are over the age of 40, you might remember Governor George Duke-Majan, and I worked for Pete Wilson, and I worked for Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. And usually what people like to say is, oh, tell me, what was he like, what was he like? What you see is what you get. He was exactly like that. There were many times that there were things that he would say that I was like, oh my gosh, don't say that. Let me just tell you a story. I'll just tell you the story. So once upon a time in California, there was a local enterprise zones. For those of you who've been in business, enterprise zones were used in targeted areas of California with hard to hire people. And you got hiring credits, you got NOL deductions, you got a lot of tax breaks. But the biggest one was your hiring credit. So we went to, when they still existed, we went to Long Beach and we went to this donut shop that had opened, and the guy's name was Dave. And Dave sat and spoke to the governor and said, oh, you've just been such an inspiration for me. I was working out and I was really getting myself together. You really inspired me to go and work out. And so then the governor said, hey, did everybody hear about Dave? He used to work out. He used to have a six-pack, and now he has a keg. That was our governor. So he was exactly what you thought he was. Very real and very much cared for California. Since then, we've had, after that was Jerry Brown, and then we now have Gavin Newsom. I do work in the California State Legislature. As a lobbyist, I work in the state legislature with all of the senators and the assembly people who represent many of the areas that you're from, in the Silicon Valley and in the Bay Area. But I will tell you that I understand the importance of what business is all about. Although the California Hispanic Chambers does represent about 815,000 jobs, and it means about 500,000, businesses. They represent about 500,000 jobs. They have about $100 billion that they impact California. But let me tell you about what Taiwanese businesses do. You have over 450 businesses, mainly in the Silicon Valley, and we know that the Silicon Valley is very, very important. But you bring close to $3 billion into the state economy. So you are a driving force for California. Not too long ago, I once upon a time worked for the California Chamber of Commerce, and you had, from the American Institute of Taiwan, Chair Rosenberger, who came to speak to the Chamber. And he spoke about how important it was that the community with Taiwan businesses work with California. Because Taiwan has consistently ranked as one of the strongest democracies in Asia. The Economist in 2023, Democracy Industry Rankings listed Taiwan 10th globally. Taiwan's strong fabric of civil society, transparent governance, and protections for freedom of expression make Taiwan a model of democracy. California has the second largest value of exports to Taiwan amongst the U.S. It is the sixth largest importer of California goods and services and the fourth largest overall importer in Asia. As you know, on February 12th, there was a reciprocal tariff agreement signed with Taiwan. I know there's many issues that have just recently happened with tariffs. I don't work in Washington, D.C. Peter can probably answer more questions about Washington, D.C. than I can, because I work for the California State Legislature. But what I'd like to discuss tonight, number one, is the important sectors that make California great. And one is small business. That's any business under 500. That's about 99% of our economy. That's where all the jobs are. The innovation sector, again, that's who you are. And our manufacturing sector, again, that's who you are. $4 trillion of the economy is what we are in California. We're about the fourth, sometimes we fluctuate to fifth largest economy, but we're driven by technology. Basically the Silicon Valley. Real estate is the other, finance, manufacturing, and healthcare. But there are challenges. What are the challenges? Well, what's happening in the legislature? What are they talking about? They use the word affordability a lot, and they use the word about health care. Right now there's a bill that was just introduced. Yesterday was the last day to introduce new bills in the legislature. There was a bill to make sure that there would be health care for all. You know what that means? Businesses will have to pay. It's a non-starter, and there will be a lot of opposition from the business community. We were supposed to be about an $18 billion deficit, and the economists have come back and said we'll be about a $2.9 billion deficit versus $18 billion. And I'm going to tell you for one reason that we're up to 2.9. It's not a deficit. They don't call it a deficit, but I call it a deficit. That's AI. And somebody asked me earlier, what would you say is California's economy? And I'm going to say two words. The Silicon Valley keeps California strong. It is the Silicon Valley, it is the innovation sector, and it's AI. However, what we hear a lot, because every year the California Budget Center puts together things, and they claim things like corporations don't pay enough taxes. The argument misses the bigger picture. California businesses already shoulder one of the heaviest tax and fee burdens in the country. The Budget Center fixates on the corporation income tax, but this is only part of the story. Most businesses are organized as pass-through entities, like sole proprietorships, LLCs, partnerships, and subchapter S-corps. These businesses don't pay corporate tax. Instead, they use a personal income tax. In fact, these pass-through businesses pay as much or more in state taxes than corporations. Corporation taxes only make up 10% of the state's local and business tax. When businesses are taxed more, we have fewer resources to invest in growth, jobs, and innovation. That means fewer opportunities for workers, less economic activity, and ironically, lower future tax revenues for the state and local government. Businesses contribute about 35% of all state revenues and more than half to all local tax revenues. So when you hear a local government say we don't have enough funding, it's because you don't cherish business. And that's the actual truth. We need to care about who we're putting into office. It's important. Other states are moving in a different direction. While California is ratcheting up costs, other states are slashing business taxes to attract jobs and attract investments to their states. States like Iowa, North Carolina, Missouri, Pennsylvania, I mean, we can't forget Texas, are cutting income tax rates, expanding deduction, and even phasing out entire business taxes. North Carolina is reducing its flat rate to 2.25%. North Carolina has seen as many as 453,000 jobs in growth because of lowering taxes. The recent headlines don't tell the story. High-profile companies continue to scale back or leave California altogether, citing high costs and an unpredictable environment of regulatory burdens. These are not just boardroom decisions. They ripple through local communities in the form of lost jobs, lower tax revenues, and fewer opportunities for working families. California's tax policy should not just be about a political argument that we don't pay our fair share. It should be about keeping California competitive, growing jobs, and making sure families and communities thrive. I just printed out a list not too long ago, and this is it. This is back and front of all the companies that have left California and how they've moved to other states. You can find this at Califormers. It's called Califormers, as in former California businesses. But opportunities for California for companies like many of you represented in this room might be available, and I'm going to talk about a few of them. Oh good, I can see it. I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to see it. There are a few opportunities that you could potentially look at in attracting business or expanding your business. One is the California Energy and Advanced Transportation Financing Authority. That's done through the Treasurer's Office, through Fiona Ma. They look at strategic, emerging strategic industries, and they come up with grants. This is grant money. So that's a place that you could look at. The California Competes tax credit is what replaced enterprise zones, but it's nowhere near what enterprise zones were. There's only about $180 million available for an income tax credit. And this goes to companies much like yours that are part of the solution and innovation. So this is an opportunity that you could go after. The Employment Training Panel, they provide literally checks to you if you need to do training of any kind for your workforce. They will literally just write you a check and you can go train your workforce. They don't tell you what your training should be. You just say, I have a training program and it's specific to my company, they'll give you a check. Also, the California Small Business Loan Guarantee Program is done through the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, called the I-Bank. And it's administered through financial development corporations. They will guarantee up to 80 and 90% of a loan, which makes the bank only at risk for 10%, which means there's a great opportunity for you to be able to get money to reinvest into your business, to expand your business, or even move a business into California. There's also the EPIC grant of the California Energy Commission that deals more in the electricity area. There are people fighting for you in California. I'm one, representing so many businesses, especially small businesses, but also the California Chamber of Commerce, also the California Manufacturing and Technology Association, CalTax, and the California Business Roundtable. We work hard for you in Sacramento to keep many of the ideas that are happening not to come to you. I do want to share a little bit about something that's coming to the ballot as a proposition, so we can go to the next one. This is called the Building an Affordable California Act, and it is going to streamline CEQA, and it's a ballot measure that's being pushed by the California Chamber of Commerce and many, many other businesses. They are right now getting the signatures required. It'll have enforceable timelines, it'll have clear standards, and I'm happy to share this with you on a website or whatever you need. There's a public comment period, have streamlined alternatives. There'll be a clock, there'll be a fix what's broken. We can go to the next one. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but the projects that it will help build and upgrade are wireless broadband systems, fiber optic, middle mile and last mile infrastructure for broadband, data conduits and switching systems and telecommunications. So we can go to the next one, so that's a little bit about telecom. But we're going to build it for housing as well. We're going to try and streamline reviews and eliminate costly delays, protect taxpayers by keeping public projects on time and on budget. It's time to cut the red tape and make California more affordable for everyone. Go to the next slide. We don't have to go through that. this is just the timeline for you. This is fine. We can go to the next one. Essential projects being clean energy projects, public safety and wildfire resilience, housing, water, transportation, public health. We talked a little bit about broadband and education. So as many of you know, and that's good, many of you know that CEQA is part of the delay in your permitting and your building. And as we try to attract more business to California, and I understand there's many efforts in trying to bring more Taiwanese investment and Taiwanese companies to California. But they're going to look at other places too, because they're going to look at the cost of doing business. So this will go on the November ballot, but we do need signatures, and I'm happy to provide any information you need if you want to have your signature added to try and make sure that this gets onto the November ballot. We have talked to some of the environmental justice groups, and some of the major groups, and I'm not going to specifically name them by name, they seem to be okay with the way this proposition is written. So with that, there's a couple of things that are happening that are going to really matter to you, and that's the governor's race. One thing I can say about this governor, and I shared this earlier today, this governor has really been good, Gavin Newsom, in one thing. He has not allowed new taxes. He has literally vetoed new taxes. Has he done a runaround through the back door doing other things? Yes. For instance, with refineries and with gasoline, he put out an executive order that basically told refineries and oil companies that they could only make so much profit. He capped their profit. So what do you think happened? They're closing down, right? So I'm not saying that he's good at everything, because we know what's happening in California, but he has been good on taxes. There are several candidates out there now who have already said yes to the billionaire's tax, which would be so detrimental to California. And so we don't need those people in office. So we need to look for people in office that are going to help us. And I'll tell you, the people who are working hardest are people like Steve Hilton. Steve Hilton is working hard, going up and down the state, trying to make sure that you hear what he's trying to say. I haven't seen a whole lot of the other folks doing that, but he has been doing that. And it would be good to see somebody like that in office, because what is he talking about? Cutting taxes. So it's really, really important, because come November 2026, of course, we'll have the ballot measure for streamlining CEQA, but we also have a governor to vote for. So with that, what does this mean to all of you? We need you to be involved. We need you to make a difference. I know that many of you have heard from several congressional members who have come to speak to you in the past, but I'm going to tell you, Sacramento is doing a whole lot worse. We have a supermajority in the legislature, and it is hard to stop anything. Where we're able to stop things is through the moderate caucus. We do have some mods who are business-friendly Democrats. That's basically the only place that we can go to stop bad things. And it's hard. It's hard to stop bad things. And I'll tell you the kinds of things that they're talking about right now. Well, they're doing everything they can to make sure that Trump isn't able to do anything. So if Trump says one thing, they're putting in legislation to try and stop whatever he's doing. There are so many different proposals on immigration. I shared earlier that one of the proposals is that police departments in California would not be able to hire anyone who worked for ICE. So it's crazy stuff like that that's happening, including health care for all. So there's a lot of things happening, and I would love to see you more activated in working with our Sacramento legislators, because they need to hear from you. And if there's anything I can do, your voice matters, grassroots matter. I can tell you that when we go in as the business community to fight on a specific bill, we hear this: well, you're here, but I haven't heard anybody from my district. Nobody's talking to me from my district. None of the businesses have told me that it's a problem. So we need you to know when there's bad things happening in Sacramento, because they need to hear from you, because your voice will matter, and your voice does matter. The Silicon Valley is what's keeping California alive. It is literally the only reason why we have any money in the state revenue and in our budget, is absolutely the Silicon Valley with the innovation sector that you all represent. That's all I have, but I'm happy to take any questions from anybody. I told you I wouldn't be long because you all have eaten, and I know that what that means. We don't want any sleepies. So.
Okay, now we open Q&A from the floor. So whoever had any question would like to communicate with, I think Yolanda just mentioned to us, voice out in your local voice. So anyone would like to exchange idea? Okay, with Jerry.
Yolanda, welcome to the Taiwanese Association. We appreciate your presentation. And question short is there anything you think California should do to prevent the business to live up to California? And also you can attract more business to California around the globe to make California great again.
Well, I can honestly say that California doesn't have a whole lot of incentives other than the few that I shared earlier. That's about it. But I will tell you that local governments often will come up with better ideas, and so much happens at the local level. And sometimes working with your electric utility, they sometimes have prices and they can work out deals to make sure that the cost of electricity won't be overwhelming, especially to a manufacturing or data center or AI center, because we know that that uses a lot of energy. So oftentimes the electrics can help you. Working with your economic development corporation is really important too, because they can take a lot of that information to elected policy and decision makers as well. I don't think that we have a whole lot other than trying to work with your local government and working with your electrics. Yeah, I used to represent CPAs and tax accountants, and they're the first line of hearing from business. And so I know how often they're trying to find solutions to try and keep businesses here, and we just keep dwindling down all of those potentials. Other than the few that I've shared with you tonight, there's not a whole lot. But I would work with the local government, try and work with your local entity and see if you can come up with something.
Next, Wendy.
I have more questions. One thing is that I visited a lot of small business because I'm running for office, and I noticed that one of the biggest thing is crimes, and you just feel that they're tired of, so a lot of them just decide to close. I think especially the minority-owned businesses and women, they've just been hit so many times. They choose not to report because they don't want their insurance to go up. So I wanted to know, is there anything you can do in terms of public safety, because the businesses will not thrive and they're leaving, and not just the billionaires are leaving, the small shops are closing too. And I also checked recently, all these private industry are basically coming to invest in U.S. There's not much going on around here. There's not much of capital investments in terms of these critical industries. So how can you do to help us in this area, especially in the East Bay, to thrive? Because I see there are a lot of nonprofits or basically their service sectors, and we can still thrive. I know you say Silicon Valley is a big thing, so how can we do to help the Silicon Valley to help us the area in this area to thrive too? So that's my question. Public safety and how to bring the industry back. Thank you.
So I don't know how much you work with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, but they have a strong voice in California, in the state legislature. And so sometimes working with them to try and make sure that your message is part of that. Public safety is probably one of the bigger issues because I think any governor that comes in will try, if the right governor comes in, they're going to work on trying to fix that. I will tell you that right now we have some very unwilling members of the legislature, specifically the public safety committees, where they don't want any new felonies, and passing anything that's meaningful in the legislature as far as public safety usually gets killed. And so it's really, really hard. I have a bill right now that we're working on copper theft, because it's an organized crime. They're stealing copper not just from broadband companies because they think there's copper and then they break the fiber and then there's no internet. But it's also schools. They're HVAC. It's also ball fields where they take it out and then you don't have the signs working. And it's hard to, we couldn't get a bill out last year because it was creating a felony if you had over 200 pounds of this copper in your possession and didn't have some sort of bill of lading or manifest that said what you were doing with it. It didn't go anywhere. So we do have an issue with our public safety. So we need to hire and vote in leaders who do care about public safety. And it does start at the local level. And I know sheriffs are now becoming more concerned about that, but and I'm not sure in your area how your sheriff is working, but I would definitely take your voice and take it to your sheriff and your local leaders. Which is better for you.
Thank you. One more question, last question, anyone? I know Yolanda is an expert in lab, so Chamber of Commerce in Northern America have experience in knocking the door in Washington, D.C. every year. And Joe, Professor Chen, is actually is a leader for that. Would you like to raise some question? Joe? Joe Chen?
Just a question about the fact that a lot of Californians have been fleeing, especially rich guys have been fleeing California and move out of California to some other states. Okay, a lot to do with tax, with a lot of business issues. Okay, so the environment for doing business in California is not as good as before. So how can you deal with it? And also the other question, because this is a Taiwanese association, so the big question really what I want to ask is how do you make it easy for Taiwanese companies to invest in California? Okay, thank you.
Well, other than those several opportunities that I shared in grants and in loans, that's about it as far as the state level. But again, you can work with local folks to try and come up with something. I know that when I worked for Governor Schwarzenegger, I shared this earlier, we used to call them red teams. If we heard of a company that was wanting to come, we would work with site locators and we would have everybody at the table. We would have the labor agency, we would have the electrics, we would have EDD, we would have everybody around the table and try to figure out solutions on how to keep these businesses. Today, there's no such thing as a red team. And so we don't have anybody that we can go to other than GoBiz, which is the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And there's opportunity for you to talk there, at least it's part of the Governor's Office. And I would definitely say, as you're trying to bring more Taiwanese businesses here, I think it's worth a conversation to have at GoBiz. And I'm happy to help you do that. Go talk to GoBiz, talk about the number of jobs, talk about the amount of economic impact it's going to be, and I'm happy to help you do that. But right now, that's probably the only place to go is GoBiz. So I would be happy to help you. And I think you're right. Things have kind of gone downhill a little bit in the last few years, and California is not as attractive but the type of work you do, and just by the fact that you're here, it's important because you're a community that needs to be heard. Your voice absolutely needs to be heard. So when there's opportunities to go to Washington, or there's opportunities to come to Sacramento, you need to be there. And if you could take one day out of your life, it's important. So make your voice known. That's the main thing.
Thank you so much. I think we have a small token for you.